Is anyone listening or watching? If so, can you please say something in the chat just so I know I'm not talking to myself? Okay, well, it says that there's 4 people watching, so I'll just assume that y'all are watching, and I'll wait for your chat to come up. Hold on one second. Let me just. Okay, 5 people now. Okay, so I guess the reason I wanted to talk about this kind of thing is because I think I'm a little bit sick of talking about politics and talking about the news cycle. It just seems like, I mean, I would say that's what the vast majority of people on YouTube talk about. And it's interesting, but it gets old because the cycle doesn't really change that much. Like, basically what happens is something really degenerate happens, and then everyone gets upset and everyone says, oh, like, this is so disgusting, what's happening, society's going down the toilet, what do we do, and I think the answer to that is we try to talk about things that are just that are more productive and more interesting, like history. I don't know how many of you are fans of learning about history, but personally, I find it fascinating, and also the fact that the history. Uh, laughing at the comments. The history we were taught in school, and I talked about this a little bit before, was extremely distorted, especially, and I know the Reformation gets really like debatable or controversial, even in these circles where there are a good amount of people who still like defend Protestantism and everything. But with that said, I don't think there's very many people who would, the revolt or the revolution, the Protestant Revolution, I like to call it. Reformation is way too nice because, painting over frescoes and things like that, destroying statues, all of those things they did, that is not reform, that is destruction, and that is what revolutionaries always do. You see it now, like in America, where they try to take down Confederate statues, they try to cover up anything to do with white people. We've all seen it. That's what revolutionaries do. They did it in communist Russia, and they did it during the so-called Reformation, or I'll call it the Deformation, just to be extra nice. But anyway, even though what's Deuteronomy 7:3? Is that something about smashing idols or something, like smashing statues? Probably. Anyway, I think that Melky, even okay, but these are Christian stones and Christian monuments. That's the problem. They're not idolatrous, and they're not pagan, and I will explain why. But basically what I would say, I really, Milky, even though you are cling to your Protestantism no matter what I say, I still think that you would not, and hopefully anyone watching this would not defend iconoclasm the way it happened, because I don't know how many of you were listening last night, but basically what I said was that pretty much the vast majority, like 98% of religious art in Northern Europe was destroyed because of Calvinists or reformers or whatever the hell you want to call them. that's what happened. But I don't think there's very many people or very many Christians, hopefully today, who would defend them. And I don't even think that Calvinists is even a thing anymore. I think they may have turned into Presbyterians. I could actually be really wrong about that. I don't know much about Calvinism or Protestantism in general, but like I said, I don't think very many Protestants today would defend any of this. So I think it's interesting to talk about. Anyway, so basically what I wanted to the other thing I wanted to bring up was, we kind of see, like, if you look at the big picture of Western art, you see a progression in the dominance of the subject matter, and in the oldest European art, and I'm talking specifically more about Northern Europe here, the historically Protestant countries. The oldest works of art we have are the illuminated manuscripts, and I can show a couple of those. So, what the heck? Okay. Yeah, the illuminated manuscripts that looked like this, and they're very Byzantine influenced. This is from England. So that's the oldest stuff we had, and the vast majority of those were destroyed. The thing I wanted to mention, though, so yeah, you basically, when you take an art history class now, you see this progression from highly religious, and then sometime around the 15th century, the 16th century, it basically, so this is still 1472, that's St. George. And also the interesting thing about St. George and the Dragon, that was probably the most, if not one of the most painted or depicted subjects in Western art up until that time. And what I find it really interesting is I kind of see this St. George, or the cult of St. George, it's kind of like a reemergence of this, what I think is like a Roman ideal of like the Roman warrior, or the warrior saint, the warrior. And I think that was definitely really important to the medieval people who were, fighting a lot. They had to fight to defend their territory, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the loss of this cult, well, the cult of the saints in general, but specifically the cult of St. George, was a huge loss. And also all the people who say, oh, Christianity makes Westerners weak, it's a religion of weakness. All you have to do is look at St. George, this stout warrior, and see that was not really the case, because that this warrior ideal wouldn't have existed. The ideal of the knight wouldn't have existed if Christianity just promoted weakness and that sort of thing. Let's see here. Were Byzantines white? I don't think so. I think they may have been, well, I don't know, what does that mean? I guess the Byzantine Empire was huge. So yeah, I guess some of the people in the Byzantine Empire would have been white. What else? Milky said, it's crappy to take over something someone else built and paint over it or otherwise warp it. Although early Catholics did that to the Pantheon in Rome, repurposed it. Yes, they did. But the problem with the difference between what the early Christians did in Rome versus what the Protestants did is they didn't replace these Catholic ideas with much of anything that I'm aware of. they painted the cathedrals white, and they wanted to get rid of this what they thought was worship of the saints, but I think was more just veneration. And that's the other interesting thing about the cult of the saints in the medieval period. And this was a really big deal. Basically, this was the saints were in the medieval mind like more than anyone can really imagine. And the Martin Luther and a lot of the Protestant reformers really hated this. The thing that they really disliked especially was the veneration of relics, or the pilgrimages to visit relics, which Catholics will defend that as saying it's not so different from visiting the grave of your ancestor. It's not, the concept overall is not that different, but I think people thought it was creepy, something like that. They really didn't like that. They destroyed a ton of relics. And then when there were these kind of new saints on the brink of the Reformation, like St. Thomas More, or Sir St. Thomas More, who was the other one? Thomas Becket, I believe. They made sure that their relics were destroyed. So yeah, and he's saying there isn't much of an art tradition among Protestants, no matter how hard you look. Yeah, because they saw the Catholic art as idolatrous. And I think the other thing that was a big deal was they wanted to get rid of this idea of anything Roman at all. So I guess if that includes, ornate churches and ornate altars and altarpieces and all of these things, then that's what they got rid of. But the problem is they didn't think through this enough to think of some, they could have replaced it with different saints. And I think the Anglicans, they did have their own specific saints, but no one even, like, they said that Christina Rossetti was a saint, and no one seems to really take this seriously. No one calls her Saint Christina Rossetti the way people call St. Thomas More. It just, in my interpretation, it didn't really ever quite hit home the way the cult of the saints did in the Middle Ages. Okay. So what else did I want to say? Oh, okay. So let's see. Yeah, so basically after the Reformation, this is still 1475. So this is pre-Reformation painting in Italy. This is Botticelli. And you can see it's not an icon at all, because the figures are, well, actually, you know what? It is an icon because it still has the iconic elements like the halo, but these people are very three-dimensional. This is very lifelike. It's not, and I would say it's not, hyper realist, obviously. It still has a stylized aspect to it, but these people look real, even if they're a little bit cartoonish to us. You can identify with this a lot more than you can with, say, the Byzantine icons. Here's another Madonna and all the saints. Or I don't know actually if those people are saints. Yeah, they don't have halos. You can see the halo, like the three-dimensional halo with the Madonna. So yeah, this is, let's see who made this. This is Hans Memling. So this would have been Dutch. And this is an altarpiece. And I don't know how many of you were listening last night, but I showed kind of how altarpieces were actually used during a Catholic mass in a cathedral. So this is these were the outer panels. So when it was closed, like they would close it during Lent and add sometime before Christmas. I'm not exactly sure about that. Definitely during Lent, this would be closed, and this would be all you would see. And then on Easter, they would open it. So you would see that. Yeah, so here we have a pagan scene. This was Botticelli, and it's obviously from the Italian Renaissance. So a lot of people think that the Italian Renaissance was supposedly this pagan movement where it was not Christian, but there's a lot of debate about that. I see it differently. I think that the pagan writers were always kind of how do you say repurposed? Not repurposed. They were studied by the monks, and like Thomas Aquinas was the most famous one because he took the philosophy of pagans, Plato and Aristotle, and incorporated that into his theology. And he is considered like the highest theologian that ever lived. So there was always this double foundation of paganism with, I guess you could just say Athens and Jerusalem. There's more pagan stuff. Okay, so I think this is the center of an altarpiece by Bosch in the Netherlands, and it's really, this is my absolute favorite. Yeah, this is Bosch's Last Judgment. So you can see all the people down here fornicating in hell. And okay, this is the best example of what I think, okay, the best of religious art overall in 1,000 years. I think this is the very best. And the reason why this kind of piqued my interest to begin with was because we always hear this story about, oh, photography took the place of painting, so we don't need painting anymore. But this is the best example of why we do need painting, of why art still matters, because that you can't take a photograph that looks like this. Like, that's impossible. Like, this is otherworldly and transportive. And can you imagine going into a church in Holland in what year is this from? 1490, and seeing this? And the scale of these things is absolutely enormous. They're not small. So this would have been right above the priest. He would have been facing this as he did the mass, and there would have been people singing, polyphony and chant and all of these wonderful things, and it would have been really impressive for a peasant or even anyone now. I think it's still really impressive. So that's Botticelli, more the Bosch, and this would have been one of the side panels of an altarpiece, and I'm going to call it psychedelic even. Okay, what else? I'll enter the full screen again. So this is Botticelli, and this is the same year. So what was happening in Italy was really influencing the rest of Europe too, and especially the Dutch art. We still have a lot of the Dutch art, luckily, and I think part of that may actually be due to Spain's control, because Spain never really, they had their Inquisition, so they never really had a problem with Protestantism. So most of their religious art is intact as far as I'm aware, and also the same as in Italy. And we have a lot of the Dutch stuff too, luckily. And that's my absolute favorite. So this is an altarpiece by Bosch. You can see he signed it in the middle right here, Hieronymus Bosch. And this is it's called the Haywain. I'm not exact. Okay, so we see like God up in a cloud up here, and then on the left, it looks like the story of the Garden of Eden, and they're being banished. And then on the right, that looks like hell to me. So I think the middle, it kind of, this is probably what a typical Dutch village would have looked like during the Renaissance. And it's fantastic. He has all these fantastic little creatures. You can't take a photograph of that. You see this, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse pointing, but if you look on the right, there's like a deer person, or what do you call that? Like a satyr, something. There's all sorts of crazy stuff going around here. This stuff has aged incredibly well. This is still, absolutely fabulous, even in 2019. Okay, so the Belden storm, that was an iconoclastic fury, that's how it translates, during the 16th century, where church art was destroyed by Calvinists. And that you can see all the cities that it happened in. It says Switzerland, Holy Roman Empire, Zurich, Copenhagen, Munster, Geneva, and Augsburg. So yeah, people would have ran into churches. And I think this was during the period when they were looking for the Ghent altarpiece. They were looking really hard for it, but they managed to, and I'll show you what that looks like. Yeah, they managed to hide the Ghent altarpiece and save it from the iconoclast. So yeah, this may be one of the most famous altarpieces that exists. And it's absolutely enormous. And you can actually see this on this bottom center panel. That's people celebrating Mass. There's the lamb, the Paschal lamb in the center, and all the people in front. And they would have, like I said before, all of these panels, they would close them during certain times of the year and then open them, and it would be absolutely amazing. Okay, I'm gonna go back to, oh, shoot. Okay, so 1536 and 41, Henry VIII disbanded monasteries, priories, convents, and friaries in England, Wales, and Ireland, appropriated their income, disposed of their assets, and provided for their former personnel and functions. Although the policy was originally envisaged as increasing the regular income of the crown, much former monastic property was sold off to fund Henry's military campaigns in the 1540s. He was given the authority to do this in England and Wales by the Act of Supremacy, passed by Parliament in 1534, which made him supreme head of the church in England, thus separating England from papal authority. So, and here, the dissolution of the monasteries in the late 1530s was one of the most revolutionary events in English history. There were nearly 900 religious houses in England, around 260 for monks, 300 for regular canons, 142 nunneries, and 183 friaries. Some 12,000 people in total, 4,000 monks, 3,000 canons, 3,000 friars, and 2,000 nuns. One adult man in 50 was in religious orders. So this was a really big deal. It was quite popular. And some of the reformers will say, oh, they didn't like it, but I don't know how many people now have actually gotten the chance to visit a monastery or to learn about what monastic life is like, but I think it's absolutely stunning and beautiful way of life. It's almost like what the communist, like literal people that tried to go off into communes in the 1960s wanted. Like that's what they were trying to recreate, but they did it wrong. But this actually worked. Like these people, they take a vow of poverty, they all live communally, they sing the divine office throughout the day, and it's absolutely beautiful. And Gregorian chant sung by monks is really something special. And most people, have never been to a monastery or explored it too much, but you could probably find some documentaries on YouTube if you wanted to know more. And the other thing that's kind of cool is they tend to be completely self-sustaining, and they build the abbeys themselves. I think there's one that that still exists today, or it's actually relatively new, in New Mexico, and they're building out of stone this amazing monastery, and it's beautiful, and you should look it up. Google New Mexico Monastery. Can't remember what it's called. I think it's actually Our Lady of Guadalupe Monastery, if you want to look more into that. So yeah, this is what happened to the convents. They just disintegrated, because if there's no monks to take care of them, then this is what happens. And this was not, the thing is this was not an organic decline. There was no hint at all of, oh, the monasteries, they were in decline, people just abandoned them. That's not what happened at all. He ordered all of these people out. This was a top-down, deliberate destruction. It was not organic at all. And if you can just imagine here, there would have been stained glass in all of these windows, and these all would have been painted with frescoes, most likely. I'm just gonna see what you guys are talking about. Meaningful destruction or just evolution? No, it was this was a top-down destruction. It was not, something that just happened. I want to emphasize that. Papist apologetics. Well, I guess if defending art and all of this is papist apologetics, I guess that's what I'm doing. But look at the world now and look what it, looked like then. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, so this is how an altarpiece was actually used. And as I mentioned last night, here's one of the 3 people that still use them how they're supposed to today. And looks like a mass or some sort of ceremony is happening. But this is, well, you can actually see even in here, the paint and stuff looks like it's kind of chipping off the walls, and this building is not in its prime condition, but the altarpiece is, and you can see how it was actually used. And like I said, these panels would have been closed during certain times. There's another close-up, and there's another. So, I mean, I guess, like, maybe a Protestant would look at this and see this is idol worship or idolatry. But I just think it's beautiful. It's supposed to be, like Catholics would say, that it's supposed to be a little foretaste of heaven. And what does it say? It says, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So I see nothing wrong with it. Here's another one. This is current. Yep, so let's see. So one of the kings of England, I think it was Edward. It wasn't that actually. Everyone, thinks that Henry VIII was the guy who kind of led the Reformation in England. But what's interesting is he actually didn't even change anything about the religion. It would have still been pretty much exactly Catholic minus the Pope. So they would get rid of any references to the Pope. But other than that, he didn't change anything liturgical. I don't think he changed anything in the churches. I could be a little bit wrong. This is what I heard. And actually, I want to bring this up. This is important. The place that I got a lot of this information was this book called, and I'm going to show it. A second. Oops. I'm going to show. Okay, this book, it's called The Stripping of the Altars. And it's like an 800-page book. I haven't finished it, but I've read parts of it, like the beginning, and it's great. And it kind of goes through and shows to people that Christianity was not in decline on the eve of the Reformation. It was actually quite strong and maybe even growing. So it may have been, threatening to some of these people. Based Edward. Really, I can't believe I actually have someone in this chat that's defending iconoclasm. That makes me really upset. They destroyed 97% of illuminated manuscripts and frescoes and all sorts of wonderful, wonderful stuff. But I guess, if someone's really going to defend that, then whatever. But I think it's the cause of even a lot of problems that we still see today, especially the problem of beauty that's you can't miss. Okay, so yes, they ordered, this was top-down official government orders, abolishing of all other religious books except for Cranmer's Book of Common Prayer, which was something he just made up in English. So all religious books tend to superstition and idolatry, commands all persons to deface and destroy images of all kinds that were erected for religious worship, provided always that this act or anything therein contained shall not extend to any image or picture set or engraven upon any tomb in any church. So they didn't want to deface their own ancestors' tombs, but anything for any dead saint they didn't like and they wanted to destroy. That would have included St. George, by the way, the warrior saint. So what's interesting is this is actually a Victorian church in the Netherlands in the neo-Gothic style. And I think basically what happened during the Victorian period was, this is what I understand, archaeologists or other people who studied religion or whatever started discovering that all of their churches had been whitewashed, and they actually started trying to restore, like this is in Sweden, and this was all restored by an archaeologist in the 1800s, and I think he restored something like 600 churches. So the Victorians kind of had a heyday with this. Hold on one second. Yeah, so they all would have looked like this at their prime, basically. Here's another one in England. You can see where the whitewash is covering the frescoes. I think they've, uncovered some of it. That's in Chichester. I don't know how to pronounce that. But yeah, that's what the rest of it looks like. Really hideous. Here's another one in Denmark. And I love this Danish stuff. It like does not get enough attention. And this one isn't even completely fully restored, but the frescoes that they have restored are absolutely gorgeous. Here's another close-up of that. It looks like some king. And in England, that's not a great photo. It's kind of small. But this was a fresco in England that was painted over. Same thing in the Netherlands. Now they turned this one into a bookstore. Okay, so yeah, basically the Victorians or people in the 19th century discovered this stuff. I think they were really excited about it, and they started building new churches in the Gothic style, which was why we see a ton of the Gothic architecture all over England, especially. So yeah, it does. I thought this was a Gothic church, but it's actually a Victorian. Luckily, it's still in use. This is in Wisconsin, of all places. So yeah, okay. So part of that rediscovery of the medieval period, and I actually think we were always taught about the Romantics, like especially the Romantic poets like Wordsworth, and who was the guy that did those kind of like naive illustrated manuscripts in the 19th century? I think William Blake. William Blake. He did those. He was really into the medieval time, and he really romanticized it. But there was actually a religious revival called the Oxford Movement in the 1830s, and they built churches like this. This is in England, so it was built to resemble what they had been unearthing from the medieval period in England. They were really excited about it, and they wanted to replicate it. So this is in London, kind of neo-Gothic, neo-medieval. This is the same church. And I think, I mean, maybe this isn't to everyone's taste, but I think it's absolutely fantastic. I highly prefer this to the whitewashed emptiness. It's splendid. This is the same architect, I believe. I think it, or actually, yeah, I think the architect name was William Butterfield. This is in Oxford. And people were basically rediscovering their pre-Reformation religion in England at that time. And most of them did not, I don't think, become Catholic, but they basically were high Anglicans or Anglo-Catholics, they would call themselves. Some of them actually did completely convert to Catholicism. The most famous was John Henry Newman. But the problem was, if you did that, people really didn't like you. They thought you were being disloyal to England. Okay, so this is interesting. I'm getting a lot of pushback in the chat that this is nice, but it's not holy. Here's the thing. The way I'm seeing it. What would you like for people to put their energy into? I think, worshiping God and making, having a craft that supports that is like the most productive thing a society can do. And not only that, but studying virtues, which has been completely lost. I don't know how you can say that that's a bad thing. No one is going to go to Rome and say, "Oh, this is silly." If it's so silly and it's not God and it's not worship, then why do people flock to these places in the millions to marvel at them? I just don't see how someone can say, "Oh, we can just worship in a shack. That's just the same. It doesn't matter. We don't need any art." Anyway, let's see. So yep, this is Victorian, that's Saint Sebastian. And you have the Saint George and the Dragon. This is Canterbury Cathedral. Yep, this is Canterbury Cathedral in England. And you can see it's still fantastic, yes, but there's these little naves in the back where there would have been statues, and the statues were taken out. There would have been a high altar here, and there would have been a rood screen here to separate the priest from the parishioners. and that was all removed. And you can see they have this really crappy little makeshift altar here. And this all would have been painted too, with images of saints and scenery. Oops. There's a little detail of, yeah, oh yeah, this is a little detail of a fresco.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Who is it?
Great, Melky. I just missed like half an hour, but
Oh, okay.
I had a question for you. The
Yeah.
last time you were talking about Bosch.
Yep.
I love Bosch.
Yeah.
But and I love what you were saying too about the peasants who show up in like the 14th, 15th century and they've never seen anything except potato fields. And these churches are amazing and psychedelic, and then the altar pieces and the paintings. But the thing is, like, what do you think? Like, what's the thing for? I mean, is this just nostalgia, or
No,
is there
I
a
think
way back to this?
this is what people should be putting their energy into. And the other thing I was going to get into that I haven't gotten into yet is basically what happened to artists after this this disappeared. And do you want me to talk about that for a second?
Well, let me just refine my question, and then I'll set you off. Like,
Yeah.
it seems to me like I feel like I know a bunch of people who think they're into like artistic things that would say, um, like basically Game of Thrones is the modern version of this stuff. So that they're incorporating special effects and like ornate scenes and like what you said about how there are certain things you can't paint. I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. But
Mm-hmm.
increasingly they almost can. Like that since Star Wars or something, they're developing these like ways of filming that make it and like I don't know, they never seem to me transcendent. I'm not really into that like film, like it doesn't do it. But
Mm-hmm.
you see what I'm saying? Like I feel like we
Yeah.
have to compete with that level of aesthetic production, like explosion scenes and car chase scenes, and people don't have the directed attention to understand kind of how to appreciate this now in 2019. I
That's
worry.
that's a good point. So what I would say to that is when you enter a church, you're supposed to be quiet and silent, right?
Yeah.
That like right there shows you that this is something that you don't get every day. You see what I mean? Like the car chases and the special effects.
Hmm.
Um, you know, that's something you get a big dose of all the time. But to be quiet and to be contemplative and meditative and to see and hear something transcendent is something that's missing from the modern world, in my opinion.
All right. Now I have another question about like the thing you've got up there, which is the what I didn't hear what you said that is. Is that English?
No, this is Danish.
Danish.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like what can you say more about what you like about it? Is it the ornateness or
Um,
the way?
I like that it's still recognizable as Scandinavian art.
Because
Like this
like
is
the deer,
yep,
like
this is
the nature.
exactly. This is a lot like what Scandinavian folk art looks like. And they're all
Hmm.
blonde and um but it's still Christian. You see, like they took their style
Hmm.
and made it, you know, kind of fit with this story, I guess. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I mean, I do like it. I actually like it, but it took me a long time. Like, and I didn't major in art history. I didn't have any instruction in this. But for some reason, I was drawn back further and further. You start with like everybody likes Salvador Dali or something,
Yep, yep. Mhm.
but then like I don't know. Then you start kind of retracing like how did we get to Dali, and I started to like some of the Impressionists, and then I started to like Caravaggio, and then like you go, oh wow, Botticelli,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and like you said, like Giotto or something. Like I guess it was mostly the Italian Renaissance for me, but um
Do you see
like
how the further back you go, like the more kind of psychedelic and interesting
yeah,
it gets?
totally. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. But not at a first glance. Like if someone had shown me Giotto when I was like 15, I would have been like, ah, because I hadn't like learned that register. It is like it's like a dialect or something. And or like yeah, it's like have you ever tried to read Chaucer in like Middle English?
No.
And it's hard. Like it's
Yeah.
really hard, but you can eventually kind of pick it up. You start to it's like you don't really need instruction because it's still English, but it there's it's on another level. And I think that's what this is like. So I'm wondering if I don't know, like I said, I guess this just feels like so hard to access for today's kind of moron culture
Yeah.
that I worry. I don't know. I worry like people aren't going to be quiet in churches. They're going to Hollywood Star Wars productions instead.
Sure.
So,
That's so interesting, actually, because that was really the argument behind the people behind Vatican II, was that they said that the Mass, the Catholic Mass, and this Catholic culture
oh
um,
yeah,
couldn't didn't speak to modern man. Modern man needed something that he could relate to, or something
right.
that he could participate in. But like I said, I think it's the exact opposite. I think that what people need is to get out of this
Yeah.
modern.
This is a good point. Did you ever see like what do you think about the Rothko museum, the temples? Like the
I haven't been to it. I don't
I
really
haven't been there either,
like
and I
Rocco.
don't love it. I don't love it, at least what I've seen on TV or on internet. But I've heard people say that if you're there, it can be like really kind of transformative in the sense that it's all quiet. It
Sure.
sort of invites that mental space.
Yeah, it's church-like, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah, with the ceilings that are vaulted and so on. But I mean, yeah, like it's interesting. You're right, probably that there's something counterintuitive about how you have to work. Like you have to go like because where I live I'm in like the Carolinas, and there's a bunch of these churches that are like they're like non-denominational, kind of vaguely. I don't know what they are. Is it evangelical or something?
Hmm.
And they're all called like Elevation Church, and they actually try to compete with like a rock concert, like, and then so they're trying to make it entertaining
Yep.
in like and so it has like a Starbucks in the lobby. And I mean it seems like the totally wrong move to me.
Right.
And it's not really work like it kind of works like they get a bunch of 22-year-olds who then like give them like the little money they have, and maybe that's like a business model, but it's not. I don't think it's really doing anything for people's like souls or consciousness, whereas
Right.
yeah, like the silent retreat monastery thing would.
Right.
But and maybe it's just that it'll have to be not everybody gets it. Like maybe we just go small time again and let these like kind of deadhead people just walk off the cliff and watch Hollywood movies forever.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of what I think. I mean, you're not going to save everyone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I say what I was going to say before?
I'm sorry. I had too much coffee
Oh,
this
that's
this
okay. I'm
morning.
drinking coffee too. So let's see here. So, okay, so basically after the Reformation, you see a lot of stuff like this, right?
Hmm.
And it's interesting, actually. Rembrandt said that his favorite thing to paint was the big religious scenes, the big mythological scenes. But he couldn't make any money doing it because the biggest patron of that type of art had always been the church.
Hmm.
And when they lost that, they lost an outlet, or like this thing that had been kind of like a padding for artists to fall back on. You see,
Hmm.
so there was a lot. We see a lot of stuff like this, and this is really interesting too because this is Vermeer.
I love Vermeer though, and you're gonna tell me he's bad?
No, no, I'm not
Oh,
going to tell you he's bad because look at
oh,
what's behind her head. You
okay.
see,
Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of meta.
it's interesting, and I want to show you something really, really interesting.
You got
Um,
the original. Is that a real painting back there?
what do you mean?
Like, would that be or is that like a real painting, or did he?
This is a
That
Vermeer. Yeah.
no, no, no. But I mean,
Oh yeah, that
the
would have been a
painting
real
hanging on.
painting. Yep. It's the Last Judgment. It looks like.
Oh yeah, so he like copied. What is that? The Rembrandt or Raphael? Raphael, I think.
I'm not sure.
But wow, that's interesting. Okay, I never
Hmm.
noticed that one before.
This was still like the Netherlands has always been mixed So there was still a lot of Catholicism there.
Do you know anything about? I watched this video. Well, okay, no, say that. Go ahead with this first, and then I'll digress a little
Okay.
bit.
What I was gonna say. Okay, so this. What is the name of this painting? I can't remember what it's called, but
Yeah,
this girl's reading a
girl
letter.
reads a letter or something.
So if you look in this upper right hand corner,
Hmm.
you see that this is brand new. This is just happening right now. They
Yeah.
discovered that there was actually this Cupid painting behind her
Hmm.
that had been painted over at a later date. So that was part of the original. So
Wait, wait. You mean? Explain that better.
okay, so this Cupid right here, you see how it's only
Yeah.
part of it's showing?
Yeah.
This was painted over white at a later date. So the original with Rembrandt had this like Cupid painting in the back
Oh,
corner, and now art restorers are getting rid of it
wow.
to restore it to how it was originally. Isn't that absolutely fascinating?
Wow. What? Why would they have painted over? Who painted over it?
Because they thought it was pagan. That's my guess.
Whoa.
Probably Protestants who hated
Yeah.
anything like that because it was, it's so interesting because we see, imagine that's not there. And we didn't know it was there until really recently.
Yeah.
It's just like a genre painting, what is what they call these.
Yeah.
It's just like contemplative, but that Cupid changes everything about it.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it even becomes kind of cute. It actually almost becomes kind of Cupid and Psyche, or the whole myth, maybe.
Right.
Like I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it would change the whole tenor of the thing. Like, or the
Exactly.
girl, yeah, the girl, and she's beautiful, isn't she? That's the Psyche myth, is that Psyche was extremely beautiful,
Right.
and Venus was jealous or something. Like, yeah, you're right.
So yeah, I found this when I saw a news article about this recently. If you Google like Cupid Vermeer, you
Hmm.
can read about it. But there's not even done getting rid of the paint back here.
Cool.
I find that so interesting. So yeah, you get a lot of paintings like this of rich people who wanted their portraits painted. Because yeah, how would there be any demand for these crazy Bosch altarpieces anymore?
What about Holbein? Do you have any of his stuff?
No.
Like,
I think he
because he
was much
does
earlier though. There's
like
Napoleon.
okay, like 1540 would be some of his stuff, but like, and the reason I ask is because he did some. I mean, he was certainly painting the rich people. In fact, didn't he even paint Henry VIII at one point?
Perhaps.
But but he also works in, like, famously in the Ambassadors, that weird memento mori thing, that the stretched out skull at the bottom, and
Mhm.
he did the Christ dead in tomb. Some of these that seem pretty, like, they are, I don't know, they're kind of Bosch like or something. They're kind of psychedelic and not just. But you wonder, was it like patronage, or what was allowing him to continue doing that?
Right. Probably
Yeah.
just rich people who wanted their portraits painted.
No, but I mean, like, the Christ painting, like.
Oh, okay. It may have been that was also the period of the Counter Reformation,
Hmm.
which
Oh,
was
maybe.
a big deal and I didn't include any of that. I'll have to do like a whole nother video on that. The
Yeah.
Counter Reformation art was Rubens
Yeah.
and I don't know if Holbein took part in that, but Rubens, who is maybe my favorite painter. I
Okay.
can't decide Rubens or Bosch. Either one of them, that was a really big deal. And with Rubens, you do get these huge biblical and mythological scenes, which disappeared in England and in Scandinavia during that time. And fresco painting also disappeared during that time.
Hmm.
Anyway, what I was going to say is like with this type of thing, like this drastic shift that happened almost overnight from biblical the God-centered universe. It shifted with the Enlightenment into this man-centered universe, which is why you get portraits
Right.
because these people are really into themselves. I don't think they care much about God or church, and in a way, it's like imagine you're like a peasant in Denmark or wherever in the 15th century or the 16th century, and all of a sudden you go into your church one day and it's been painted over. Everything's different. It's now, the liturgy is now in Danish. You are Danish, aren't you?
I have probably 14% Danish or
Oh, okay.
something. Mostly English though.
Okay, well, either one. This definitely applies to you either way. Yeah, imagine you go in there and everything's different. It's demoralizing, right? I mean, like, no
Yeah,
matter how you see it, wouldn't that
absolutely.
have been demoralizing?
Absolutely. Especially if it's that, like you said, it's actually worse in that it's not even just different, but it's like in a different register. So they desacralize, kind of. I mean, it's interesting. Like my study has been mostly of Italian, but it happened in the North too, where like and it feels so incremental. It feels so like, the thing you were saying yesterday about, I think you showed a couple of like, I don't know what they were, annunciations or something from probably the early 14th or late 13th century, even,
Mhm.
where they're all flat and they don't even have perspectivism and stuff. And then
Right.
these things start to creep in,
Mhm.
Giotto, and like by the time you get to like, I don't know, like who comes like between him, somewhere between, like, I guess Botticelli, like occasionally if you read about Botticelli or certainly Caravaggio, they make a big deal out of Caravaggio, like was painting actual models. So he,
Sure.
like, at some point between the I don't know, like 12th century, where the paintings of Mary are probably not even based on human models. So the
Mhm.
painters are like extracting pure, like, ideal forms out of their head and kind of painting that. And then, but then at some point they start substituting models and it just becomes replications of the world. So in that transformation, yeah, I like this, the one you've got up right now would be, well, they wouldn't put this in a church, would they?
No, no. And
Right.
actually, someone in the chat is saying that's a picture painting of a painters guild, and yes, that's true.
Uh-huh.
These are all. This is like a group portrait of painters, I think. Yes, yeah, because he
Yeah.
has the stuff, and he's saying it's not. They're not rich people. Well, they actually may have been rich, and that's why they. The thing is, like, what I'm trying to show is like the shift of focus from God to man.
Yeah.
Like these
Yeah.
people, and I can't remember the exact quote, but someone said like the greatest like Chartres Cathedral was anonymous. Like we don't know the name of the architect,
Yeah.
you know? But these guys, like they wanted to be remembered. They
Yeah.
wanted to be known. And I think like you see like it's a little bit of pride creeping in my opinion.
Hmm.
It's like a shift in perspective. Um Another thing, let's see, what did I want to show? I think who is this? That's Joshua Reynolds. So that's what, like, I feel like when you think of English painting, you think of Joshua Reynolds. He was like in the 18th century. Yeah, this is 1775. And you get these like, I was just at a museum recently. You get these monumental portraits of men, and I think they're really boring, personally.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I actually think of like Turner or something when I think of good English,
Oh, okay,
which
yeah. Well, that was even later.
yeah. Oh, is it late? Like I'm looking at his date.
Turner is almost like a proto-modern
Yeah,
because
he
he's
is kind
almost
of.
abstract.
Yeah, some of his get really like abstract, and that's what I was gonna ask you is, did you see Paul Talk did a recent video about what he called the abstract elements of essentially realist painting. So you can look at a painting like one of those Judgment of Parises, where there's the three naked goddesses in Paris.
Mhm,
But it's like the whole thing is that even though those are like realistic looking, many of them are like realistic looking, the painters had like a whole kind of like language for, it's actually like thinking about where shapes go and how they fit together and stuff that's kind of beyond, you can almost look at it like an abstract painting. And
mhm,
then, so it's like, I guess what I'm saying is that at each of these levels where we're kind of becoming more and more removed from like God, and like lowering it to the world, there's also kind of an intellectual justification for it, do you
mhm.
think is this kind of degeneration inevitable, or
No, I don't think it's inevitable. I think it depends on people and what they care about. and what their mindset is, basically. Because in Italy, like Caravaggio, was Caravaggio Italian? I want to say that he was.
Yeah.
That was later too. Like that was probably in the, I think the 18th, or no, it was, I'm sorry, no, 15th, 1610. So that's post-Reformation still.
Right, but he would have
Like,
been
obviously in Italy there was no Reformation.
right. But it's, I mean, the whole point is, you're right. Like if you go to what's the one in, I've been there a couple of times in Florence, the Uffizi Gallery makes a big deal out of Caravaggio, and they'll show you how, like, you can see the same model, the same guy, the same, like, human in more than one of his paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like he's just painting, I mean, but like, it's interesting in the way that, like, there is something kind of interesting about it, right? To be able to paint the world as it really looks, like in the light and the colors. Like, I get that. That's neat. And you could even, it's like, yeah, but it does depend on your sense of, like, what God is and what you're trying to do with these paintings. Or the famous, like, the Judith beheading Holofernes,
Right.
Caravaggio, which is, like, I guess not realistic, but
No, it is though.
well, it's like, I don't know, the blood squirting out of his neck and stuff always looks a little, I don't know. Maybe.
I think it's pretty realistic.
I'm looking
That's
at
a
it
great
now.
painting though. I love Caravaggio. But like he's still doing like these biblical scenes, you know?
Right, but like the point is that the real seems to triumph over the biblical in these. Like, you can almost look at these without knowing they're biblical scenes,
That's true.
you know?
But I think what we were always taught in art history was at the beginning of like the realism actually did start with like Giotto.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Town.
what I thought too. But or
Mm-hmm.
at least, like, yeah, the steps toward it.
Mm-hmm.
Um
And I like that. I'm not saying we should go back to like medieval iconography. I think that would actually be a good place to start because I think so much of the art of painting and like technique has been lost.
yeah.
But I feel like when people try to paint these really realistic things, like they're just not skilled enough to do it, even,
Yeah,
sadly.
maybe you're right.
And
Do you have any painters that you like who are living that you like?
no, not that I know of, not that I've seen. I have a friend, and I actually sent you the video of him.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch.
Know who's good is Alexander Stoddard. He's not a painter; he's a sculptor, but he does a really beautiful job. But yeah, that guy, he went to Norway or something like that. There was this guy named Odd Nerdrum,
Mm-hmm.
and he is trying to like do this like old master painting style. And yeah, my friend, or it's actually my friend's husband, he went to Europe and like learned to paint with this guy, and he's like one of his disciples. But he's had a really hard time like getting people to take his art seriously. Like like Paul talks about this all the time. That he took a path that was, for himself, that he said no one wants, these paintings anymore. But he actually has a really interesting video where he painted frescoes. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I love those frescoes that he painted. Like I want to like commission him to come paint my house or something, because I think he did an absolutely phenomenal job. And he did kind of paint in this. It's not a hyper realist. It's like he had a couple, like one, even though it was like Greco-Roman stuff, it kind of reminds me of those like Danish frescoes.
Yeah. I think it was Europa, or the one where the bull is bucking the woman off. Did you see his video about that one?
Mm-mm.
I don't know, but like, I agree. The thing is, it's like, I can't quite tell though if it's like LARPy or is
No.
this the way back? You know what I mean? Because like you said, there's no demand for it, but that doesn't really mean it's fake. It might just mean that nobody cares yet. Like, hopefully there will be a return to that kind of a thing. Wouldn't it be awesome if you could get one of those for just a couple $1,000?
Yeah.
Because no one cares right now because there's no demand.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like I don't know, were you listening at all when I talked about altarpieces and how they were used?
Like a little bit. I kind of missed part of that.
Okay, so like
I mean, I saw you talk about opening them up, and there's
that was such like a concrete purpose for art, like to be used in worship, and not only like it's in the church, it's like at the center of everything.
Right.
And I think that like I said, I showed a couple of pictures where people are still doing it today, and I think that I'll show it again. I think that could be revived. Like this is new. Like this church was recently restored, like in the past like 5 years,
Yeah.
and it's thriving. It actually is thriving. But this is, what Vatican II basically tried to destroy too. Like these people do everything pre-Vatican II,
Mm-hmm.
but it's, they're using an altarpiece like the way it was meant to be. Like there's probably half a dozen people doing that. This is it too. Hold on, I really like this image. You could really see like, you know,
Yeah.
does this just look like idolatry to you?
It's like no, it's like what I was saying last night about how it looks like local culture to me more than anything else, and I do understand the northern resistance against it because it's like in a way, you know how like when you go to like if you go to China and then you see a 7-Eleven or a Walmart or like an Outback steakhouse, you're
Mm-hmm.
disappointed because it's like, oh, this like doesn't belong here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about like seeing kind of Roman or even Byzantine forms in like Ireland that feels like just it's just I don't know, like it feels fake or something.
Interesting. But like, I feel like we were just talking about how like the Scandinavian, like the Danish frescoes do look Danish, you know?
Yeah, there's an element of that. Sure, you can usually identify it, and you're right. Um, I don't know though. Yeah, it's hard for me. I like it's weird. It's like I like this stuff. I love it. I go to Italy whenever I can and I like it.
Yeah,
But I still end up feeling like I can't quite um it doesn't quite move me. I don't know. Like
sure.
yeah. I
This,
because like I actually think the church thing for me is mostly just about like people and especially as society becomes more and more like anti-church.
mhm,
I'm thinking more about catacombs life, where we'll basically be like handing back and forth like tiny little crappy, like almost amateur level drawings just to try to keep the story like together. We don't have really the luxury of building some of the stuff that you see in high church like Renaissance Italy or something right
right,
now.
right.
It
Um,
is, doesn't it just make your brain marvel though at the fact that they built these things in the 14th century and
yeah,
like
but like that's why
no,
I'm like I want to see it happen again.
yeah,
Like it would be easier now if people just cared. And
yeah,
what I was gonna say, like this looks like this is Dutch, and I think it looks Dutch. Like this doesn't look Roman at all to me.
right, true, yeah,
This is Italian, and it looks Italian.
hmm
I don't know where this is. It looks like Italy to me. Or this is the Netherlands. Does this look Roman to you or Dutch?
well, the gold capes and stuff, like I don't know, the whole like I do have this like the balding shaved priests like of the Catholic Church always they still I don't know, I guess that is awesome. That one I love though.
That's like a
Where's
Dutch
that?
neo-Gothic church. So
Yeah,
it was
that's
built in the Victorian period when they were like rediscovering
mhm,
all of the medieval frescoes and pre-Reformation
mhm.
stuff, and they got really excited about it and had like a little mini revival. And this was the result of it.
Yeah, it's interesting too to think about like I live in, kind of one of those new South Carolina cities and people are still building churches because people are moving from the north, but the architecture is such garbage. Like they build it out of, stucco and steel beams and put in fake glass windows and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's like, because somewhere, on, even if it's like the church committee, someone is taking into account like cost and efficiency, and they're building it like you build a warehouse almost.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Everyone in the chat apparently hates all of this. I'm kind of amazed.
Well, that's because they're illiterates. Like they don't understand, their own history. Like, I mean, it's actually funny to think about what, like, a lot of them, like, I've kind of turned the corner, and I'm like, I know, because I just saw somebody say, like, oh, you're wasting your time masturbating about this stuff when you could be saving your people.
This
And it's like,
would save your people. That's the
like,
problem.
yeah, exactly. Like, and also, who cares about saving my people?
If they're not doing
Especially,
anything.
like, a lot of these guys are honestly like incels who don't have kids, and they're talking about saving, and it's like, well, who cares? Like, like, there's nothing to save if
Exactly.
it's just DNA.
Exactly.
But I don't know. I guess
Like
I'm
that's what
I'm
Michael Jones said is like ethnos needs logos. It
right.
does. Otherwise, it's just nothing. Otherwise, it's just a deracinated people, which is exactly what we see now.
Yeah.
Or, even worse, when people start worshiping like Black culture.
Which but was like forced on them almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so what was I going to show? Show it all of this. Oh, okay. So here we have the picture of Napoleon. I kind of wanted to show some of the Vatican II stuff. So this is kind of a small picture.
Hmm.
This was a church in the United States.
Hmm.
And then this is what they made it look like after Vatican II. It looks literally diabolical. Correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
Isn't that scary?
Yeah, it looks like
This is in Kansas City.
it actually looks like why is that? What did they took the altar down?
Because
And
I literally think this was diabolical. Yes, they took the altar down
yeah.
and just made it
What's
scary.
the sculpt? Can you tell what is that a Jesus? It's not a crucifix at
Looks
the
like a
center.
Jesus to me. Nope. They had to get rid of all the crucifixes.
Wow.
And you can see they got rid of the altar rail too.
Yeah.
And then this is what it looks like now. And I think they tried, but like, look at how creepy that little altar is in the center. It's not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be at the far end.
Right.
And look at how fabulous the stained glass was too.
Yeah.
Like this still looks really creepy to me. I mean, I guess it's an improvement on this, sort of. Like that just looks demonic, but I
Yeah.
still really don't like it. But I can see that they tried. But this
Yeah.
round thing,
Right. What is that thing in the middle? Why is it there? Like, it
because
looks too democratic, right? That's
Masons infiltrated the church and said that the altar, you should be able to walk around the altar. So they started building all of these churches in the
oh my
round.
gosh.
And yeah, because the Masons have their little, if you look at like what a Masonic lodge looks like, it's very similar to this. So it was basically like a coup.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that creepy? Here's another. This was once fabulous, but look, there's like this weird modern sculpture, and then there's another creepy altar in the middle. You see that?
Yeah, I don't like those.
No.
Those look like
Creepy?
conference. They look like a conference center or
Right.
something. Like.
Oh, this is really crazy. So this was in New York.
Hmm.
This was a church in New York, and they renovated it, or some people call it recavated it. Look what they did to it. This is the same church.
Hmm.
Can you believe that? That's even the same? Like it looks like nothing.
Wow.
It was like modern art. Like I think this was actually what it looked
Who is doing this? Like,
like.
because these are still
Women?
Catholic churches.
What?
These are still Catholic churches.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But like, so what? How do you explain that?
Because
They
either
got
communists
infiltrated,
or
or
Masons infiltrated and did this.
is this Vatican II? Like,
Yeah, this is all Vatican II. People were. I don't understand it myself. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, and I still don't.
not to go too hard, but like, don't you think Vatican II? Like, I feel like Vatican II was in large part a kind of response to the Holocaust.
The Holocaust?
Yeah, you don't think so?
No, no, it was way
Yeah.
after that. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, it was 15 years, and it took them like what? Yeah, no, the idea is that I mean, well, okay, why did Vatican II happen?
Because communists and Masons infiltrated the church.
Well, why? Why were they
Destroy
interested in?
it. Because it was actually
Yeah,
gaining in popularity at that time.
yeah, because so like, and the thing is, it was like pre-Vatican II was still like E. Michael Jones Church, you know.
Right,
So it provided cultural like authority and unity, you
right.
know, and so like it is kind of a threat to the Jewish diaspora, especially in the wake of
I think
like
it
the
was a threat to
Holocaust.
the Protestants especially in the United States.
Oh, well, it could have been that
The
too. That's
Protestant
interesting. That's
hegemony.
interesting.
They
Yeah.
did not want Catholics. That was a big deal at that time. They didn't want Catholics to
Oh, so you think the Protestants infiltrated the
well, I mean
Vatican?
that's partially a fact, like that Protestants got together and helped draft the new mass with the Pope.
What?
That actually happened. You can look it
Oh
up.
my God. So, okay, well, that's interesting.
Right. So
I
I
don't know
think,
about that.
but all I can say is like this was not an accident. This doesn't happen on accident. You see what I
Right.
mean? Like people
Hmm.
were not happy about this. A lot of people just completely stopped going. I would have.
Yeah.
Completely demoralizing. Here's another one. You see the before and after?
Yeah. I don't, yeah, this is bad.
It's really bad. But
But
I'm saying
again,
like
it's like,
this was
it's
another basically Protestant Reformation, I guess you can call it. They
right.
did a lot of the same things, like with the Protestant reformers, they got rid of the high altar and they replaced it with wooden tables.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, here's
Hmm.
that same one. But yeah, like you can see it's still, good, but they removed the high altar here and they put all this like weird modern stuff in.
Right. Yeah, these look theater-like. They
Right.
don't look church-like. It's a little different.
Right. Because they took all of the things that made it look like a church out.
Yeah.
Here's another one. They just stripped it. You see?
Yeah.
They put in like this weird, like modernist altar.
It's actually kind of I mean, it's funny. The your whole perspective on this does make me see Jews and Protestants as being the same in in the sense that they like to strip stuff down and like have you've probably noticed that in general Jews have almost like there's nothing like Luke has even said this. There's never anything aesthetic. Like
No,
it's always plain. Their synagogues are ugly and
they don't care.
even I mean in fact even the Jewish homes I've been in seem like kind of tacky to me in general. Like
Right.
maybe it's just a different aesthetic, but it seems like stripped down and plain. I don't
Right.
know. But
Yeah, it's like to oppose the
I
European style or something.
yeah, idolatry, like vague idolatry.
Right. But like the problem is like if you get rid of all that stuff, like what are you left with?
Well, okay, so just to play devil's advocate though, like none of this is really essential. That's what I keep coming back to. Like ultimately they lived for 300 years in the catacombs and another 500 years before any sort of cathedrals were built.
Hmm.
So like what real like the essence of the essence of the moral or the moral essence of Christianity was about kind of neighborly in-group identity
Hmm.
in a crumbling empire. So you're trying to like build networks sort of parallel to um, the empire, which is deracinated and capitalist. Or
Hmm.
that's kind of my. I know I'm sort of projecting like a certain ethic on it,
No, I think you're absolutely right. But like
but like
what
I
churches are doing that now, Protestant or Catholic?
yeah, yeah. Well, but I see again, I think that part of this is that you're almost asking churches to compete with the entertainment offered by the empire.
Well, no, it's not entertainment though. It's the opposite. I want like a church should be like a quiet place of contemplation, which is the exact opposite of what you see everywhere else in the world. It
But
should
it
be
was. But
opposing the
remember,
world.
yeah, but in the 14th century, 15th century, it was the most psychedelic thing these people had ever seen. So if you were a
But it was
peasant
still
farmer,
quiet.
illiterate,
It was still quiet, you see?
yeah, it was quiet. Well, but the organs and stuff, like, it actually would have knocked your socks off, like, compared to your daily life. So to go to church would be like going to like an IMAX theater in the
No,
15th century.
I don't see it that way.
Hmm.
I mean, like, I see what you're getting at, but it's it's supposed to be, like, otherworldly and contemplative.
Show me that Liverpool
Oh
cathedral.
my goodness, this is the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's really horrifying. So this, yeah, this is a Liverpool Catholic cathedral, quote, cathedral. It's the most
Wow,
hideous thing I've ever seen in my life.
that's really junky. Let me see the interior. Oh,
See, doesn't it make you just, like, sad? And you should see
yeah,
the so-called masses they do in here. It's
yeah.
even
You know, the
worse.
interesting how, like, it's interesting how the if you look at the architecture, like it's like it's weirdly not that much different from a real cathedral. I don't know. It's like I can't even
Yes,
yet
it is.
decipher.
The
No,
shape.
but I mean, like, it has the domed ceiling, but it's like, why is it black? And then it has like
There's no
these
light.
little,
There's no light coming in.
yeah, it has these like side altar things, but they're symmetrical and flat and, or I don't know. There's
No,
something
they don't have any
horrible
side
about.
altars. They got rid of those.
Yeah.
Because, okay, I guess, like, the point I'm trying to make, like, when you get rid of, like, tradition in architecture, in art, in music, you have to, like, have something to fill that void, and it tends to be something that's new and different and modern.
Right. It's the world. It's
It's the
like it's
world. It's
empire.
the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't really work. Like, this church is probably pretty empty on Sundays.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it is because it's demoralizing, you know? And they tried to make it like an IMAX theater, right?
Well, see, this is I've been okay, see what you think about this before you move on. I've been like so I sometimes go to this local Methodist church, which looks not terribly different from this. Like it's got movie screens up in the corner. I may have did I send you a picture of it one
Yeah.
time? Like it's just stripped down and modern and kind of whatever. But and the thing is, like everyone shows up in like business casual, you know,
Yep.
and they talk about the weather and like you know sports leagues and stuff and it's like why am I even bothering with this like what I really want in my heart is like it doesn't have to be a room full of 300 people. Actually, it
Mhm.
doesn't even have to be a room full of 300 people facing the same direction with the hierarchy implicit in the altar and all that. What I really want is the
Community.
like, yeah, the shared sense of reality that
Mhm.
happens around a campfire with your friends, you know?
Yeah,
And
but that's not church, you know? Like,
no, I think it is. That's what I'm saying. I think it is.
hmm. But, like, that's what Vatican II was trying to do. Like, they were trying to make it more about the community.
Hmm.
That's why they got rid of, like, the separation between the priest and the parishioners. And that's why, they built churches to look like a Pizza Hut because they wanted to, like, bring it down to the people's level and make it more about the community. And they also did this thing where they would have laymen distributing communion to people instead of
Well,
the
like, what
priest.
do you think? It's interesting. You know what it is for me is that you are more comfortable with the transition to power, whereas I think for me, I'm excited by a Christianity which is like the outsiders club.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Here's a good example. Like, okay, look at, like, the SSPX, for example.
Yeah.
Like, they're basically a catacomb church. They're in opposition to the Vatican,
Yeah.
but, like, they're more Catholic than the Vatican too at the same time. But, like, they have to, like, use Protestant churches because the hierarchy won't let them in, and it is, like, very catacomb like. But they're able to attract a ton, like, tons of people because they have the tradition. You see?
Yeah.
And like right now, like they're in the midst of like planning to build like a Gothic cathedral because they have so much growth and they need it and they want something that's like in continuity with, you know, the past.
Right. Well, I do. Okay, here's a good point. So if you and I are trying to agree, like if I'm trying to find the common ground with you,
Mhm.
the it's just what you said there about almost like the connection to the past would get its hooks into me. Like I like the idea. In fact, here's what I hate. I hate the idea of going to a church that my own great grandparents like wouldn't recognize. So if they would
Exactly.
sit down and go like, "Ugh, what even is this? It doesn't seem
Right.
holy." Then what's the point? And so I
Hmm.
think if you could make something that would like that's part of I do like that idea that like Christianity should draw a line in the sand and stop like evolving with progressive empire culture.
Exactly.
And of course, the longer they hold the line, the more out of sync they become. But then also the stronger the in-group identity becomes because there's
Exactly.
no mistaking like which side you're on at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, well, I mean, that's like, that's actually what part of that was. I remember one of the like first kind of political wake ups I had in probably 2014 or 2015 was when I saw on Twitter one of those guys tweeting about the kind of degenerate West or something, and he was saying, my great grandpa or my grandpa didn't fight in World War II to ensure that like two men could get married or
Exactly.
something. You know what I mean? And like,
Right.
yeah, once you realize that, you're like, yeah, I want connection to the ancestors
Hmm.
and and uh and something permanent, like something that's kind of aspires to eternalness. Look
Hmm.
at this shitty. This is sorry to swear, but this is
Dump.
what a dump.
Oh, this is really
Oh
interesting.
my God.
Okay, so this was uh
Is that in Charlotte?
no, this is
Oh.
Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
This is Collegeville, Minnesota.
Hmm.
And this was the original abbey. It's actually an abbey. And
Hmm.
there would have been spires here. They chopped them off. Can you see that? How it's just
Yeah.
flat?
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't have a picture of what it looked like before. But they turned the church into a conference hall, as you can see here.
Of course.
And they built a new church. And it looks like this. Isn't
Wow.
that creepy?
Yeah. And it looks like a bug hive. Like,
Right. A
why
beehive, you know, yeah.
why would anyone go there? It's so crazy.
Exactly. And no one does go there because
Yeah.
creepy and out of sync. And it just, you know, people were so excited about doing something new.
Hmm.
But
See, okay, part of what I think I want to make the case, like, I think you're right in your critique, but if we're talking about how to get back, I think there actually now has to be now real iconoclasm. Like, we have to sort of blow these churches up,
mhm,
or walk away from them
right.
and and like sort of start over. I don't. There's no like you can't reclaim that. I don't even want it.
No. Can
So
I respond to someone in the chat
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
isn't Christianity against ancestor worship? I would say no. I actually heard a Catholic theologian say that the whole idea of the saints, the communion of saints, who are people's ancestors, they're real people that we can point to, that is a form of ancestor worship.
Hmm.
It's a form of memory, of remembering like the martyrs and remembering great theologians. And what's cool about it is they're all different. You know, like they all have their own special strengths, and it gives people something to aspire to. Like if they want to imitate this specific saint, like maybe they can't relate to Jesus Christ that much because his life was different, but there's always going to be some saint whose life was very similar, who did try to imitate God, who who people have an easier time relating to that, I guess.
But it does make me like Muslim sympathetic because it does feel or what like what'd you call it, like idolatrous or something,
Hmm. So
like
you
the
think we
worshiping
should
of
just forget about all those people then? Because
mm,
everyone's actually worshiping them.
I don't know. I've been reading. Have you ever read Nehemiah, that book in the Old Testament about building the wall?
No, but
And
that's funny. Taylor Marshall, I don't know if you know who he is. He's a
no,
YouTuber, and he was having a talk about Nehemiah or the
it's good.
struggle.
And I've been rereading it today. And the third chapter is all about, like, literally just a long chapter in the Bible giving shout outs to individuals who like rebuilt sections of the crumbled wall.
Yeah.
So, it's like some guy and his son rebuilt the section between the bakery and the temple of, or the tower of whatever. And
Mhm.
and it's like that's it. It's just this like remembering of individuals
Right.
who participated in the cause. I mean, mm,
Memory is important. It's very important.
we have, like, in my dining room, my wife hung up all these old black and white pictures of our family, as many, like, as far back as we could get.
Hmm.
And I kind of love it. Like, at first when she did it, I was like, I don't know. I've seen people do this and it looks cluttery, but we put them all in white frames and they're all black and white and it looks like pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm burning incense and on my knees before my ancestors, but there's like, it gives you a sense of trajectory
Hmm.
when you have memory. So I do think maybe, but again, you know what I'm saying, Viv, is like a lot of this is cultural and I like it. I
Yeah.
think we need culture. I'm not anti-culture, but it also isn't really, it's not what I think of as the essence of the church. And maybe it doesn't have to be like, I'm not saying you have to like be, you don't have to always be talking about the essence of, or like the moral core of Christianity. Like there's other
Hmm.
facets of it, but
I don't know. I guess like, what was I going to say? I heard someone say once that like Protestants, like they're against having images of saints or statues of saints in churches, but then they'll have like you walk in and there's like photographs of their founders of their church. Like how is it
yeah.
really so different?
No, it's not, and that's good. I think that's good. But like when we're talking about this, to me, the most interesting stuff is actually the art that would like catalyze, and maybe this could be architecture too, that would catalyze like psychological transformation, and actually probably some of the what do they call that? The lives of the saints stuff, if
Hmm.
told the right way, could maybe do the same thing.
Right, and actually, like that's how the Catholic liturgy works. Is pretty much every day of the year is dedicated to a different saint, the liturgical calendar, and the mass would be kind of revolving around that saint. Well, not every day. Some days are different, but a lot of the days.
Are you guys going? You go to one of these SSPX churches?
Hmm.
Are you converting or no?
I don't know. I'm not saying that in
Is
public.
your husband? Did he?
Yeah, he was very not how do I say it? He was very unsure. He's been agnostic his whole life,
Oh, really? Did he
basically.
grow up Catholic or
No,
other?
he grew up Episcopalian,
Hmm.
but his family only went to church basically never. He was baptized and then they really never went back. So he never had any Christian instruction or anything like that.
Hmm.
But recently, I don't know, I guess I talk about it a lot and I listen to a lot of sermons and things like that. And he recently decided that he's really into it and he does want to. And I didn't force it. I really didn't. He really came to it on his own, I think. And I'm really happy
Yeah,
for him because he's never believed in God in his whole life.
interesting.
Yeah.
I gotta go eat lunch here
I'm
in a
going to go
sec.
too. Actually, we've been
Okay.
on for a long time. So I think I'm going to end this.
All right. But good stream.
Yeah,
Interesting
that
stuff.
was fun. Let's
All
do
right.
it
See ya.
again. All right. Bye.